I'm working with a CEO at a company, and in 2 weeks we turned around a prototype that will expedite their workflow so significantly his mind was just blown, because the way he describes what his business need as a CEO is he's thinking strategic outcome. You want to outsize your growth compared to your operating expense to create that desired margin. CEOs and business leaders are thinking along those lines. How do I scale in a way that's sustainable? And right now, my team is doing a great job, but at this current scale, it's okay that they've got manual workflows and spreadsheets, right? But if you're about to go down the path of stacking on 5, 6 companies a year through acquisitions, guess what's not sustainable? Living in spreadsheets, because now you're going to multiply the manual labor and efforts and the issues that come from copy paste errors, et cetera, through that process. So this is a way for me to come back to answering your question is, it depends on the leader in the organization and their role as to how they're going to describe the business outcome they're trying to get to. And a really good strategically minded analyst is going to be critical in developing custom software applications. Somebody who can have that conversation with the CEO and say, okay, I understand that. Because in some cases, if you're down at operator level, somebody who is adopted the standard operating procedures that are those manual workflows, that can be very well documented, by the way. And their personality profile, because, as a leader in my organization, we're very aware of personality profiles and where people might fit based on their natural inclinations. Like, what do they like to do? Are they black and white rule followers? If you want black and white rule followers who are just going to adhere to the SOP, and they get really uncomfortable if they're asked to do anything outside of that routine. So if you're talking to somebody at that level and they're defining what they want in the software, you're going to replicate the manual process. It will eliminate probably copy paste errors because you're going to do some level of integration. But is it really going to achieve what the CEO's strategic vision is? Like in this particular example for the CEO I'm working with, he has analysts that can only handle 2 projects per week maximum. And each project takes a significant amount of hours because of the level of research they have to do and the process of which they develop the results and ultimately that deliverable for their customers. That's a major scaling issue for them. And his KPIs for success are going to be, I want them to be able to handle 6 or more projects per week. And
without increasing the expense.
Well, yeah, he's also able to articulate his cost per project, which in conversation with him, and this is another way to think about how AI impacts software engineering with going beyond just things like cursor, right? Is in the interview process with the CEO, I'm capturing all the conversation in transcripts.
Yep.
Then I'm taking all that information and I'm vibing with an AI tool to create the detailed project requirements document, which I need as context. But I add another step in the process, which is where you get some really strategic outcomes, which is fascinating to me. So I take the PRD, I take all of the artifacts from the client, including their SOP documentation and sample outputs, and the transcripts from my conversation as to what's important to him, what is really the business goal. And I'm going beyond him describing features and functions, because we tend as human beings to start with the solution and not the problem. So if you can get somebody in that flow, whether it's a BA or a really strategic-minded software engineer, they need to work with the stakeholders to understand the business problem and desired outcome, and then shift the conversation back to features and functions. But let's use AI to recommend some features and functions based on all that context.
In addition to that, you can take a functional design document, like as you had said, take all that content and put it in this functional design document where a business analyst can vibe code, I guess, to get the concept put in place and have AI help you build a good portion of that. And then when you want to move forward and say, hey, I think this is going to meet our results, that's where it helps with the developer have a better understanding of the results that they're expecting. And so their focus would be, how can I contribute to the result that they're expecting?
Yeah, it gives everybody context as to why we're doing this.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And so the
precisely, yeah.
Yeah. So one little example here to tighten this up a little bit for this example I'm sharing with you guys. is I took all of that context, and in this example I used of Gemini 3.0, I put the project requirements document. It was less functional, it was more project specific, which identified all of the types of users, features, functions that they needed. But I combined that with all the transcripts from interviewing the CEO. And then instead of saying, give me prompts I can use in my vibe coding tool to create the prototype, I added a step in the middle. And the step in the middle was, I acknowledged that the tools that we're using are automatically going to create a landing page after you log in. They just are. They have to, if you don't define it, it's just going to make something up. The user logs in, this is what we're going to show them. Generally, it's going to be some kind of metrics, whether they're important to that user or not, but it gives you something to work with. Instead, what I did is I said, taking in context as to all this information, all the sources provided, and understanding the core business objectives, recommend a landing page for the analyst once they log in. Gemini came back and said, wow, considering, and I'm not kidding, it's like, wow, it's very complimentary, which cracks me up in these tools. So anyway, the outcome that I got for that analyst landing page, guys, it blew my mind. And it was just a recommendation, right? It wasn't the prompts I needed for the proof of concept, but it said, considering the CEO's business objective of being able to increase velocity in terms of how many projects an analyst can happen per week, you don't really need a dashboard with KPI measurements, but you need to gamify the experience. I would recommend a Kanban board that shows them the status for each of their projects based on their flow. And let's show them a velocity meter so they know that they're operating within the new service level agreement they have with the CEO. And then we can even color code some of those cards, and then we can give shortcuts and call out projects that are at risk of violating that new SLA with the CEO. So we're driving the right behavior. So AI gave me that recommendation.
Isn't that insane, though, if you think about it? One,
yeah.
You mentioned documentation. I get far better documentation from the AI than I've seen from any developer. That I'll come out and say, like across the board.
Yeah.
And two, it comes up with ideas and suggestions that you don't even think about.
Yeah.
And it executes them. So it's baffling to me. And I also sit here because I do talk to some that, well, AI, I can do this. So I got to do this. It's going to take me 160 hours to do this. And I'm sitting there, I scratch my head sometimes and said, just use AI because it will even give you ideas that you didn't even think of.
Yes.
That's the time saver right there and can you imagine if you were to do that without AI right now, the amount of time that you'd have to take and translate what they mean, and then you're just based on the fact alone, and you're not thinking of outside the box at that moment, not yet, right?
Not yet.
Until you start speaking to someone, you may need to step away and talk to others. Here, you can have that within an hour. You can have a full conversation, say, hey, have you thought about this and that based on this context? You could be up and running fairly quickly in the amount of time. So that's like your output has significantly increased.
Yeah.
A boatload.
A boatload. Yeah, I had probably 6 hours of effort to get to and that includes interviews with the CEO, some Q&A via email threads, receiving standard operating procedures and documentation. So I gathered all that context all the way to the PRD. So less than a full day for the work. Okay.
You don't have to read the SOPs.
No, I mean, I've got context and I have some Q&A around those SOPs from 2 1-hour sessions in the interview process.
Yeah.
But that was it. And then I think I'm roughly, the team roughly 35 hours into the clickable prototype.
And what would that have been before based on this?
120 hours.
So that you'd had 25%.
At least, guys, at least.